Hi and welcome back to Easy English with Rosanna Roy on Bookmark Tutorials. This video is on verbs. Before we begin the video, let me remind you guys to subscribe to our channel so that you can stay updated on our content. Also do check out our segment on Ubuntu. We know that verbs are a very important part of language. Let's look at the definition of a verb. It's a word that shows an action, an event, or a state. For example, run, walk, showed, shouted, grow, smile, thought. These are all verbs which express an action or a state, as you can see. Let's try putting them in sentences. My mother makes delicious cakes. Here in this sentence, makes is the verb which indicates the action of making the cake. He came running to help me. Again, here the word running, which shows the act of running, is the verb. Similarly, we can see that Alice drank her coffee quickly. Here, drank is the verb. The wind blew fiercely. Here, blew is the verb. I sent a mail to my professor. Here, sent is the verb. We saw that verbs indicate an action that is taking place or a state of being. Based on the type of function they serve, verbs are classified into different categories. They are stative and dynamic, main and auxiliary, regular and irregular, transitive and intransitive. Let's see what these terms mean. Let's start with regular and irregular verbs. In English, only verbs can have tenses. Depending on the tense, a verb can have 5 different forms. The infinitive or base form, the present form, past, past participle, and present participle, which is the ing form. That is, words ending with ing. The difference between regular and irregular verbs is that regular verbs follows an established pattern of verb tenses. The present form ends with s or es. The past form will end with ed or ied, and the present participle will end with ing. Whereas the irregular verbs do not follow that pattern. One learns to use irregular verbs with experience, which makes them slightly harder to learn than the regular verbs. But no need to worry, you'll get used to it with practice. Here I have given a chart of forms of verbs, and I have included some very common verbs that we use. We can see that some of the most commonly used important verb forms such as to be and to have are irregular. The present form of to be is am and is. I am and he is or she is, and the plural form of the same is are, and the past form is was and were. Again, the past participle is been, the present participle is being. We can see that it does not follow a pattern here. At the same time, a commonly used verb love, we can see that in the present it's love or loves. The past form is loved, past participle is again loved, and present participle is loving. Similarly, we can see that the other regular verbs also follow such a pattern. Let's move on to main and auxiliary verbs. The main verbs are the main action mentioned in a sentence. For example, I have used this sentence, Vani is sleeping now. Here, sleeping is the main verb, but the same sentence has another verb which is. The function of auxiliary verbs is to support the main verb. Be, do, and have are the most important auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary or helping verbs such as is and was, they help to show the tense of the sentence. Modals are used to express mood or ability. They are also important auxiliary verbs. I have given a chart of modals. They are used to support the main verb. Let's look at some examples of auxiliary and main verbs. They are cooking. Here we can see that the main verb is cooking and are is the supporting helping verb here. Similarly, in do you know him, do is the auxiliary verb and know is the main verb. We need to remember that main verbs can appear in a sentence with or without auxiliary verbs, while auxiliary verbs never appear in a sentence without main verbs, because their purpose is to help the main verb. Let's look at some more examples. The auxiliary verbs are written in red and the main verbs are written in blue. She is playing the guitar. Is it raining? Could you pass the salt? I must go now. Let's move on to stative and dynamic verbs. Stative verbs express a situation or a condition, whereas a dynamic verb expresses a physical activity or a process. Examples for stative verbs are think, own, like. Examples for dynamic verbs include run, speak, cook. Let's look at some examples of stative and dynamic verbs. I think it's a fantastic idea. That coffee smells good. I like chocolate. She plays tennis every Friday. I'm walking to the store right now. We went fishing yesterday. Let's keep in mind that stative verbs cannot be used in ing form and only dynamic verbs can be used like that. Let's look at what transitive and intransitive verbs are. The major difference between transitive and intransitive verbs is that a transitive verb will always have a direct object. That is, when used in a sentence, the format will be subject plus verb plus object. Some examples of transitive verbs are cook, take, make, buy, and send. On the other hand, an intransitive verb will not have an object. Examples are live, die, laugh, cry, run, and so on. To identify whether a verb is transitive or intransitive, we can try applying this formula. Subject plus verb plus whom or what. If the sentence answers to whom or what, that indicates it's a transitive verb. On the other hand, if it's an intransitive verb, you will not get the answer of whom or what. Let's look at some examples. Pat gave me a book. This is a transitive verb. We can see that the sentence has a subject, which is Pat. Gave is the verb, in this case a transitive verb, and the book is the object. We can try applying the formula that I mentioned earlier in this sentence. Subject plus verb plus whom or what. Here we all have the subject and the verb. To whom did Pat give the book? Me. Or the speaker. Pat gave the book to me. What did Pat give? Me or the speaker? A book. Hence, we can see that this satisfies the formula I mentioned earlier. This sentence has a direct object. That makes this a transitive verb. Now let's look at another sentence. The baby was crying. Was and crying are both verbs. A main verb and an auxiliary verb are used here. But we can see that this sentence does not have a direct object. We have the subject, which is the baby, and the verb or verbs here with no direct object. We can try applying the earlier formula here. Subject plus verb plus whom or what. Here in this sentence we cannot find answers to whom or for what the baby was crying, and we can conclude that this does not have a direct object. I have given some more examples of transitive and intransitive verbs. Paul passed her a cup of coffee. The company has offered me a job. They laughed uncontrollably. We talked for hours. we saw what are regular and irregular verbs, main and auxiliary verbs, stative and dynamic verbs, transitive and intransitive verbs. But I also wanted to mention that there can be exceptions, and verbs may not always fall into the pattern that we discussed earlier. Sometimes verbs can be both regular and irregular. I have given some examples here. The same verb can be used as both a main and auxiliary verb. I have a car. Here, have is used as a main verb. In the second sentence, I have visited the local museum many times. Here, visited is the main verb, and have is used as an auxiliary verb in this sentence. Similarly, some verbs can be both stative and dynamic depending on the context. For example, the verb think. What do you think? In this sentence, the verb think is a stative verb. In the second sentence, on the other hand, what are you thinking is a dynamic form. Verbs can be both transitive and intransitive as well. Let's see some examples. You have grown. Here, it is an intransitive verb. In the second sentence, we have extended it a bit. You have grown a beard. That makes grown a transitive verb. From these examples, we can understand that the form of verb can change depending on the context. This may sound a bit difficult initially, but with practice one can learn how to use verbs effectively. Let's do a quick recap of some of the things that we looked at earlier. In English, only verbs can have tenses. Verbs have 5 different forms based on tense: the base form, present, past, past participle, and present participle. Main verbs may or may not appear in a sentence along with auxiliary verb, whereas auxiliary verbs always appear in a sentence along with main verbs. Stative verbs cannot be used in ing form. Only dynamic verbs can be used in ing form. Because the ing form or the present participle form indicates an action that is being done right now, which makes it dynamic. To check whether a verb is transitive or intransitive, we can apply the following formula: subject plus verb plus whom or what. A verb may change its type depending on the context. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any queries regarding the topic, or if you want to add something to the topic, do share them in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel Bookmark Tutorials so that you can stay updated on our content. Do let us know your feedback. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye.